The Shadow Guests by Joan Aiken. 7. Moley. Do you happen to know whether that monkish chronicle mentioned if there was a Simon Curtis killed in the Crusades? Cosmo asked Eunice at breakfast the next day. I don't remember, Cosmo, but it seems awfully likely, doesn't it? There was an appalling mortality in those Crusades anyway. About 50% of those who went never came back. And on the earlier, more disorganized ones, I believe it was more like 90%. No wonder the ones who came back were so pleased with themselves that they lie on their tombs with their legs crossed. Poor Simon. I suppose he did get killed. Poor Simon, echoed Eunice. Where did you find him? In my mind, I think I've been having dreams about people. I wondered if something was going on. You've been, rather absent lately. Cosmo looked at his cousin nervously. Eunice was a scientist. Could she possibly believe in what had been happening to him? He did not think he could tell her, not just yet. He needed to get himself sorted out first. She went on, giving him a cautious glance. Dreams are usually memories. The computer in your mind pressing a button, selecting something it wants to show you that it reckons is important. Do you know I read somewhere that we use more energy suppressing things we want to forget than in remembering things we want to keep? Isn't that strange? Do you think, said Cosmo, that my computer could press a button in somebody else's mind, someone who had been dead for hundreds of years, or that his computer could press a button in my mind? Eunice looked at him gravely. I don't see why not, she said. Telepathy is a very well-established fact by now. People are getting in touch with each other's minds all the time, and I wouldn't think that an interval of a few hundred years could make much difference. Listen. She switched on the radio, which at that moment happened to be playing a Mozart bassoon concerto. We are hearing exactly the way Mozart heard it in his mind, just about 200 years ago. It's just as if he is transmitting his idea to us. So if a tune, why not other things? Pictures, sensations, tastes, ideas, other kinds of sounds, formulae. We have to remember, too, that our main senses, sight, hearing, feel, taste, smell, are a terribly limited means of finding out what's going on around us. We are like deaf, colorblind, myopic bats groping about. Dogs can smell things that we can't. Owls can hear sounds our ears can't catch. Telescopes can see objects far beyond our range of vision. Heaven only knows what is happening right in front of our noses, which our primitive apparatus just isn't capable of grasping. We're like a little old lady with an ear trumpet and a crystal set, trying to hear the London Philharmonic, which is playing away at top volume in the next room. She looked at her watch. Heavens! I must get on with my proofs. I keep forgetting that just because you're on holiday doesn't mean that I'm off the hook. See you at lunch, and she hurried off to her study. Maybe I ought to have told her, Cosmo thought. She is so busy, I shouldn't distract her. This wasn't his real reason, though. He knew that Eunice would be perfectly prepared to stop and attend to his problem. But somehow, obstinately, he felt that the boys were his problem, not hers. Otherwise, she would see them, wouldn't she? No, the boys were his visitors, if you could call them that. It was up to him to deal with them. Cosmo decided that now was the time to make a thorough exploration of the mill buildings. He had been rather ducking that. The insides looked so dark and cobwebby that Eunice said the floors were rotten, and he had really been quite occupied, one way and another. As usual, he couldn't resist standing on the footbridge and staring down to the clear, fast-running waters of the dribble. He thought about Con and about Sim. Had he dreamed them or made them up? Were they products of his own mind? How could he ever tell? They had seemed perfectly real. There, moored on the bank, was the boat in which Sim had been lying reading his book. There across the lawn was the walnut tree, the lookout platform across the lawn. The lookout platform, defended by the poles that Con had helped hammer into place. Surely they were real people. If I'd made them up, if I'd invented them, he thought, I'd have liked them more from the start. I would have made them into ideal friends, but I didn't like them, not at first, and then, later, I found out things about them that I hadn't expected. So they must have been real, mustn't they? By and by he would tell Eunice about them, but not just yet. All of a sudden he decided he didn't want to explore the mill today. His decision was affected by an optical illusion that he had for just a moment or two. A few semi-rotten planks were leaning against the wall of the mill building. For a brief flash of time, he had been certain that he saw a man in a black cloak standing there, motionless, watching him. Then he turned his head a bit farther and realized with relief that what he had seen must have been the triangular dark shadow of the planks against the wall. But still, the mill would keep for another day. Instead, he did various jobs for Mr. Marvel, helping him sink 2 posts and make a gate for the pigsty. And after lunch, Mrs. Tidings said she was going to walk over the fields to the Getting Under Edge to visit her cousins, who kept shop there. She asked if Cosmo would like to go along. He hadn't been that way yet, and said that he would. They set out together wearing raincoats, and Cosmo carrying a basket which contained a cake Mrs. Tidings had made for her cousin. The diagonal path they took climbed up through the wood behind the house. Bluebells were beginning to come out, but were still only half unfolded. The general effect was like a greenish-gray mist through the wood. Halfway up, Cosmo noticed a tremendously strong smell of garlic. Looking down, he saw that they were above the point where the brook bubbled out of the hillside of the spring and began its descent. "Ransoms growing down there," said Mrs. Tidings. "Ransoms? Wild garlic. See those white flowers? Keep off a peck of vampires, those would," Mrs. Tidings said with her sniff, and Cosmo chuckled, thinking of Remove's nickname for Eunice. If they knew what she was really like. "How are you getting on in school, then?" said Mrs. Tidings, as they came from the top of the wood. In front of them now stretched a long, smooth ridge of plowed land which they would have to cross. It was like walking over the back of a whale, high and windy, with gulls and plovers wheeling around them. Their path went ahead in a series of right-angled turns, working round the edge of the fields. The sky was grey and flurried, undecided whether to rain or not. "School? Not too well. The work's all right. But I don't like the people. They're spiteful." "Ah, they're like chicken, I dare say," Mrs. Tidings said. In spite of her age, she had no trouble keeping up with Cosmo. She walked with the loose stride of a countrywoman. "You keep chicken cooped up, they take to pecking themselves and each other. Children's the same. I don't hold with boarding schools. It's not natural to take children from home, but I dare say they'll get better, you'll find, as they get bigger." "Mrs. Tidings," Cosmo said, hopping over a still ahead of them, across a pale brown horizon of curved plowland. They could now see the steeple and roofs of Getting Under Edge, a small hamlet huddled against a grassy hillside. "Well, do you think the Curse will ever stop? You've been worrying your head about that?" "Of course I have. What about when I grow up and have children?" "Well, I think it will stop in the end," said Mrs. Tidings after some thought. "Trouble is, when someone gets real furious, like that old priestess must have been, and you can't blame her, poor soul, with her daughter and her grandson killed, you get someone real vicious angry like that. What they're going to do is going to have an effect for a long time. It's like dropping burning acid on cloth. It don't go through only one layer, it goes down and down, but it won't go on forever. In the end, it'll come to a thicker layer of cloth, maybe, and there it'll stop." "And you think it'll be like that with the curse?" "Ah, I do." "What sort of things might stop it, do you think, Mrs. Tidings?" "Well," she said matter-of-factly, "maybe your ma and your brother done might stop it, going off by themselves like that, breaking the pattern, putting in another kind of layer. Do you see what I mean?" And immediately, Cosmo did see what she meant. He looked at her in amazement, thinking that her shrewd little wedge-shaped face was exactly right for the sort of person she was. An 8-foot patch of sunlight came sweeping toward them along the ground. Cosmo felt like bounding right over it from end to end. "Look, the sky's clearing," he said. "I believe the sun will be out by the time we walk home. See that big chunk of blue over there?" And we will pause there.